Dictionary defines it as an act or an experience or ordeal by which one is purified, sanctified, initiated, or named. Or 1b of this definition says a Christian sacrament marked by ritual use of water and admitting the recipient to the Christian community. But simply looking up the definitions of baptism do not describe the act or experience that Merriam-Webster describes in baptism. For example, there's so much more connected to baptism than just an act or experience. I found that baptism was really hard to preach on this week. Thanks to Owen, I struggled with it, and it was a big challenge. But I think it was such a hard topic because it's something I hold special to myself. When reading the verses for today, I was struck in a different way because I heard something unique. And I want us to dissect this for a little bit because I find that it is so unique to who Jesus is and who and what his ministry was all about. So Jesus comes to John the Baptist, and John the Baptist says, I need to be baptized you, but you come to me. First off, John the Baptist has some guts, because trying to stop Jesus from getting baptized is a super bold statement, in my opinion. But how would you respond? If Jesus came to you and said that he needed to be baptized, would you say yes or no? I personally would be scared that I would screw something up, because simply, it's Jesus, right? Jesus is the one who came to save us all in the story and is asking to be baptized. While this is terrifying for John the Baptist, it shows the example that Jesus wants us and calls us to live a certain way. Jesus is calling all of us to be baptized because it will lead us to a life of righteousness. Because all of us will sin at some point in our life, and we will not be able to fulfill all righteousness like Jesus. But by us living a life to strive towards righteousness, we will make a kingdom the way it should be. So you're saying, okay, Katie, righteousness, what's this big word? Righteousness is a big, super challenging word. Righteousness is a main theme in the Gospel of Matthew. And we see it mentioned also in the Sermon on the Mount and other stories in Matthew. So obviously, it's a big deal for Matthew. In one translation of our reading today, verse 15 says this, "For it is proper for us in this way to fulfill all righteousness." For it is proper for us in this way to fulfill all righteousness. That word us is not just Jesus. It's calling each and every single one of us to try to fulfill this life of righteousness. Righteousness is not only just for Jesus, but it's also for John the Baptist and all of these other people who are getting baptized in this time and today. In Jesus' baptism, he's called himself and us to both honor God's will. Righteousness means following what God has called upon our lives, following and answering what God's will is. Jesus knew that this righteousness was necessary for all. So it's not just for him, which is why it's important. Now, many of you probably have way more life experience than me, right? But life has probably been challenging. So Jesus is calling us to do this uncomfortable thing of answering with righteousness, meaning following God's will. And so I'm saying to myself, you face the struggles in your lifetime, and you still want me to follow through this life of righteousness. Now trust me, I'm pretty sure my road rage and getting frustrated with other people is not God's righteousness. But the thing is that living a life of righteousness means trusting in God's will. Through this life, you have probably faced and dealt with challenging things that made you angry at God. And knowing that if you lived this life of righteousness, you will supposedly be blessed. So I say this today. The beautiful thing about righteousness is that Jesus needed it too. It's not just you and me who need this righteousness. Jesus knew that this righteousness was necessary as well, because all of our life mission and goal is to live out God's will. To live out this righteousness, Jesus calls us to be baptized to show this commitment to God's will. Now, while I was baptized as an infant, baptism was something that I didn't quite remember, obviously, because if I remembered my baptism as an infant, that'd be pretty incredible. But I do have a story about baptism that came to my mind when I was writing this sermon. In 2001, my father accepted a job down in Chesapeake, so my hometown in the Virginia Beach area. This was a big move for our family because our family and all of our family lived in the greater Richmond area and still do. So we moved in November 2001 into my forever childhood home, in the home that my parents still live in. I enrolled into a child care because I was a cute little 3-year-old girl, and then I begged my parents for us to attend the church where my child care was. Now let me just say, I was good with words at the age of 3 or 4. And just imagine a cute little girl with no front teeth, seriously, was missing all 4 front teeth, and the cutest, which I mean ugliest, bangs chopped right at my forehead. For the first couple of Sundays that I begged my parents to go to church, it was interesting. A lot of times it was just my mom and I, and then eventually my brother came along. At this time, my dad worked for Hex, the company that we moved down to Chesapeake for, and often worked weekends and Sundays being in retail. However, I distinctly remember he started being at home on some Sundays. And my mom just told me that I would jump onto the bed and beg him to come to church with us. Soon, at the age of 3 and 4, the whole Wax family sat in the 4th pew at Deep Creek United Methodist Church. And let me tell you, that was the best thing that I could ever have done as a child. We attended church, my dad still here and there, and of course, I instantly became involved in children's ministry. No surprise there, right? So my family became unwantedly active, thanks to moi, and here's the thing. My dad would only come once a month or so with me being active in these ministry activities and pleading me pleading to him to go to all these activities, such as potlucks, because of course we had potlucks, we're Methodist. At this point in my parents' marriage, things were rough. My mom went and looked at houses back up here in Richmond, and their marriage was struggling. Then God's will started playing out. My dad started coming to church more, and after his commitment to attending church and making an effort in building a relationship with God, he sat down with our pastor at a time and decided to get baptized. I distinctly remember it. It was the spring of 2003. I was about 5 or 6, and it was during Lent. My dad decided to accept this righteousness, to accept God's will, and was baptized as an adult for the first time ever. And boy, was it beautiful. I've been mulling over these events, thinking about how this impacted my family. With my dad getting baptized, he was able to comprehend why we were at church all the time. He attended all of the children's choir events that my brother and I were in. He helped out the church on cleaning days. He was truly able to support our family spiritually in what was a time that we thirsted for it. We were able to handle my dad's heart attack at the age of 33. We were able to handle the several job changes, the pay cuts, the economy crashing, the refinancing our house, and all of the other challenges that we face as a family. Life is hard, but God gives you the challenges that you can handle. He's not going to give you something that's impossible. He's saying here in the verses today that if you accept this righteousness, if you accept God's will, then He will make the path possible. My dad's baptism changed my life. And I know it changed his and for the remainder of our family. My dad has been able to support me unconditionally through this discernment process of what God is calling me in to ministry. He has been my support system through times where I needed a shoulder to cry on, which was more than just once. Ultimately, I think that is why Jesus is telling us how important it is to be baptized. Because baptism gives us a heavenly Father to call upon and cry out to Him. It gives us, as Christians, a guideline to follow. It gives us an opportunity to be called to do the uncomfortable with ultimate reassurance. Baptism, thank you, Merriam-Webster, is more than just an act or occurrence. It is a life-changing event proclaiming that you are accepting God and His will to live out. Baptism's beautiful. It's God's promise to change our lives and impact each person for the better. So today, we're going to take some time to remember your baptism. Now, if you're like me and you don't remember your baptism, I will say this. Your baptism was God calling you to a life of righteousness and to live out His ultimate will. The water that we have here can give you a moment of rejuvenation. It can give you an opportunity to say, God, I'm here to accept this righteousness, to do your will, no matter the cost and the journey. And if you too are scared to say that, I want you to come forward in hopes that you will pray, that you will consider what your baptism means to you. Now, if you haven't been baptized, take this opportunity as God calling you into a new journey this January. Similar to my dad, use this opportunity to experience a time of change. Use this season to talk to Pastor Owen about what baptism looks like for you. Now's the time to see that this is the ultimate, that Jesus was the ultimate example of the importance of baptism. Baptism is not just an act. It's a life-changing experience. Let us pray. God, thank you for giving Jesus as the ultimate example of what baptism means. Thank you for giving us this time to prepare our hearts and to show us your word of why we have baptism as an example